couple of weeks ago, I was extremely honored to be invited into the beta testing team for a brand new Commodore 64 game, Hired Sword 2. Now this game is being brought to us by the same kick-ass crew at Doublesided Games, the folks that brought us Vegetables Deluxe, Labby D'Amour, and other recent hits for the Commodore 64 platform. This particular game is for Commodore 64 specifically, and it's what the inventor of the game calls RPG Light. It looks a lot like Ultima, except it's about 10 times prettier, but it's definitely more of a hack and slash and a linear game to get from point A to point Z to finish it, which I have done recently. In any case, I'm going to talk more about the game in a different video in the future because I really want to spend more time on that in depth. But for this, I wanted to walk you through my own personal test environment, which I think is fairly unique to the testing team. A lot of the folks on the team are actually running Vice, which is the very popular and very kick-ass Commodore 64 emulation platform. I actually wanted to use real hardware, and so I'm going to go through a mixture of new stuff. I know that looks old, but it's actually quite new, with some old stuff sprinkled on top, and some old stuff to get to where I wanted to be to make this easy for me to do on a daily basis, because builds are coming out on almost, if not every day, then every other day, a brand new build would drop and you had to start all over. And if I'm using disks, that started to become a problem. So I want to walk you through how I wound up solving this problem and making it a really fun experience, not just to test this game, but to ultimately play it and finish it. So first, let me walk you through the essential hardware that I used. This right here is it's the individual computer's MK2 Reloaded motherboard on the inside, and I'm using all original chips that came from a broken bread bin, actually from two different broken bread bins. It actually uses original chips from an NTSC Commodore 64, as well as the original SID chip, right, the original bread bin one. It has still original keys from that bread bin, and the case obviously is virtually new. It's from the Kickstarter from a couple of years ago. I picked this up on eBay for just about $24, something like that. And then I actually got one of these little metal guys, little badges, to fit into that place because I didn't like the way the stickers would sink down into the grooves, and it actually stands up on there, which looks pretty sweet. Alright, so that's the Commodore 64. Now, I also am using a 1541 Ultimate cartridge. Now, if you're not familiar with this, I highly recommend you go research this thing. It basically is a cycle-accurate 1541 drive FPGA. So what that means is it's going to run just as slow as an original disk drive. It's going to do all the same things the original disk drive did, but it gives you so much more. It gives you the ability to use little SD micro RAM that you pop right into the side. This is a version 2, and there's a 2 Plus that goes beyond this. In any case, lets you pop the SD card in there loaded with all of your game files. And that's how I was able to make this process relatively smooth whenever I got a new build from Roy Riggs and the Doublesided Games crew, right? Now, I'm also using a 1702 color monitor, all original, and it looks amazing, just like the day it was bought from the store. And I'm also using a 1541-2 disk drive, and I'll explain why in just a moment. And finally, I'm using a Retro Game Boy's brand new controller pad, which has two buttons. One is typical, right? This is the fire button like on any Commodore 64 joystick. The other one's programmed to actually jump, or in other words, press up on the D-pad. This comes really in handy for games like Mario, the one that came out last year. If you don't want to just sit there and go up every time you want to jump. That's why I got this originally. My preferred joystick, and the one that I've been using since back in the day, every now and then it would double fire. And I never really noticed this on any other game before, but in the Hired Sword 2, a lot of it's menu driven, and you're having to go through various menus and select them. Select different options, and if you click more than once, it's going to jump through them. And so I needed something more precise than these old buttons could provide. So I busted out the brand new Retro Game Boys pad, and I never had that problem going forward. Highly recommend this. It's made out of Florida. It's high quality and very, very accurate. When I would get a new build from Roy, I would basically go through this process. I would turn on the machine, or actually first I would turn on the 1541, right? Turn on my monitor, turn on the machine. Now, what you're going to notice is it goes into this mode, which is very common to people with the 1541 Ultimate. If you're not familiar with it, this is going to be like, what just happened? Who took over my computer? It's not that big a deal. You just press some of the buttons on the back of the cartridge to get into the SD card that's loaded. And you can see mine is fairly well organized. And I wound up putting the builds at the top level so that I could go right into all these different builds and check them out, right? So that's an actual disk that I can then run. So that's what it's going to start to do. When I first started testing the game for Doublesided Games, I would get a single C64 file. This was basically just the game file, and on the game file it allowed you to save up to 6 save states. You could do 3 save states on a drive 8 or 3 save states on a drive 9. When I first started playing the game, I was loading everything off the Ultimate cartridge, which is drive 8 by default. And I was saving the games directly to that cartridge as well, which is extremely easy and really, really cool user flow. However, if you're getting a new build from the dev team every day or every other day, and you're loading it from drive 8, you're going to lose your save game states. And that was okay with me in the beginning. I was just trying to figure out how to play the game and understand the mechanics. But by the third build, I started to get a little bit... I started to feel like I wanted to get further into the game than just the beginning stages and not overwrite my previous save states every single time I got a new build. So ultimately, after talking to the Double-Sided Game team, one of them suggested I hook up drive 9. That way I could save my game to drive 9, play the brand new builds every time they drop on drive 8, and it never hurts my saves. Perfect. So how do you actually set up a system where you've got the Ultimate cartridge is drive 8 and an additional drive is drive 9? That's what I wanted to show you really quickly on how I did that. Really quick, let me just explain why hooking this up the way I did not only had value to me as a beta tester on the Doublesided Games team, but it also might have value for some of you out there as new games are continuously made for this fantastic old computer. Now, first of all, the 1541 Ultimate cartridge can only be one device ID, right? It can only be one drive number. It's either 8, or you can set it to 9, or in theory you could set it to whatever number you wanted that the Commodore 64 supports. But by default it's set to 8, and most of the time most things are looking for files off of drive 8, right? Save files, though, oftentimes are coded to look elsewhere, like drive 9, which is fantastic in a case like this, because if you have a save disk like this, like I do, what it's going to mean is, let's just say, I'm not saying it's going to happen with this game, but it could happen with other games in the future where, with a brand new game, a month after you've been playing it, the company says, you know what guys, we found a couple of little added features that we wanted to put in here, or maybe there was one strange little glitch that we wanted to get rid of and release a new one, release a new version of the game after it's already gone out to customers. It could happen, right? It could happen. Well, if that's the case, you would download that. If you're only using the cart, you could download that, put it on here, fire it up, but you're not going to be able to play your old saves because they're all on the same drive. They're on the other D64 file. If you had been saving all of your game saves to a separate disk, on 9 for instance, you could download that new file from the company and install it onto your cart and fire up your old game. No harm, no foul. You don't, as far as you're concerned, you're not even going to miss anything. You're going to be right back where you started when you last saved, right? So having some of your game files saved to a different drive ID sometimes makes sense. Now, I will say this. When I was first starting out, like I mentioned earlier, saving to the same drive was a really fantastic user flow. It was seamless. It was easy. You just mash a couple buttons and you're done. You're mashing the same buttons to do this, and you get that nice, satisfying sound, as my son would say. Ah, I like the sound of the original drive. That's a satisfying sound, isn't it? It's like, yes, I agree, son, it is. In any case, there are practical reasons for this. It's not just nostalgia. In this particular case, I really needed to keep my save files separate from the new builds. Now, granted, in the beginning, I was retesting and retesting and retesting the same areas, and there was real value to that. But ultimately, as a gamer, I wanted to get to the end of this game. And so as new builds started to drop, I wanted to continue forward, and I started finding different little issues and different things that we could talk about as a team that we thought we might want to massage before it went out to the market. And that's why I wanted to have it on a separate file like this, a separate disk. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is that this looks a little bit different. For those of you that have one of these cartridges, you're going to think, hey, what am I seeing here? If you've never hooked up an additional drive, this is going to look a little different, a little strange. Usually, the way this works is you've got a cable, and it's oftentimes quite short if you're using the one that came from Gideon, who builds these cartridges. You have typically a cable that goes from here directly right into the serial port in the back of your machine, right? This is the video. Well, the way this works, if you want to use a second drive, is you disconnect the small cable, and you're going to actually get a longer cable that connects straight from this port. Remember, this is drive 8, and this is going to seem a little counterintuitive, but this is the way it works. This is set to drive 8, and I'm going to put a long serial cable from this port all the way back to the back of the 1541 after I set the dip switches on the back of that drive. The left one goes down, the right one goes up. That's how you set 9 on the back of those drives, and you put this right into the serial port. Then you take another cable from the back of the machine, the back of the drive, and you lead that into here. Okay? So from here to the back, from the back to here. Then what you can do is you can actually go into the cartridge, which I'm going to show you in just a moment, to create a blank disk for your saves on drive 9. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create a formatted disk that we can save our files to, save our games to, right? So the first thing you want to do is put that in drive 9, since that's where we're at. So what you're going to want to do right off the bat is go into basic, right? F3 if you're using the cartridge like I am, and you're going to want to format the disk that we put in the drive over there. And so there's lots of different ways you could do this. You could use a cartridge that has a format command. I could have done that myself because there's cartridge images on there, but I'm just doing it the old school way because this is the way, no matter what, you're going to be able to do it yourself at home. And it's open 1, 9, right? Because this is a drive 9. If it was on comma 8, it'd be for drive 8. 15, comma, and we're going to get our quote in there, and then we're going to say n colon, and I'm just going to call this HS2 saves, I guess. If you're wondering why my keyboard sounds so exquisite, it's because I'm using the mech board. This is not the original keyboard, and it actually uses Cherry MX switches. I used the yellow ones, and oh my god, I can type better on this than I can a lot of my Amigas. It's amazing. Unfortunately, they're not being made right now anymore, but there's hope that they'll come back in the future. Fingers crossed on that. All right, so here anyway. Now I want to go to comma 00, and I'm going to close those quotes, right? And then another colon, and I'm going to say close 1. And now it's formatting the drive over here. You can hear her going to work. Gotta love it. Love that sound. The 1541-2 is just it's the best Commodore 64 drive they ever made. Let's be honest. I'm not talking about the stuff for the 128, like the 71 and the 81, but for the Commodore 64, man, the 1541-2 is so sweet. It's just smooth as butter. There you go. Get in there, girl. Now, if I say load $, doing this one-handed, y'all, and I get, oh, wrong drive. It's it's trying to do my cartridge. Sorry, cartridge. Load $, comma 9. There you go. Really, what's in there? Well, could it be? Yeah, HS2 saves right there. What up with that, yo? That is sweet. That's what that is. All right, so now that we have our blank disk, let's go to the next step and fire up Hired Sword Builds. The most recent one I got. Do, 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 do. Okay, we can get a little sound in here. It's got awesome music by Mike Richmond. Okay, so what we're going to do is press fire to start. And it's going to say, start new game. All right, well, I have to actually do that because we haven't saved anything yet. And I will bypass the intro screens, so you don't have to see any of that stuff right now. There's been plenty of this leaked and shown elsewhere, but I won't go through all of that. You can do that for yourself later. Now, let's go ahead and go to disk and save this thing. And I'm going to save it on slot 1. See, there's 1, 2, and 3 slots for save disk 9. So here we go. And there she goes. She is saving the intro. Boom, progress saved. It's that simple. And that's how I was able to get this going. In fact, I was kind of idiotic at the very beginning. Roy Riggs, the developer of the game, sent me a blank D64 file because some folks don't know how to make those on modern hardware, which is totally understandable. And I thought, oh, maybe there's something special to the save disk, right? Sometimes old games, they would make you create a save disk straight from the game menus themselves. He sent me a D64 that was for saves, and I thought, oh, I need to actually copy that from 8 to 9. And I used a cartridge image on the 1541 Ultimate to copy that blank file over onto my formatted. Come to find out, I never needed to do that because it was just a blank disk is all it was. In any case, that's my setup. I hope you enjoyed going through this little bit of hardware nerdery. I know I enjoyed hooking it up and getting it to work the first time, and I can't wait to show you more about this fantastic RPG mixed with a little bit of Leisure Suit Larry here in the very near future. Until next time, guys.